A dangerous night in the middle of America as a huge storm moves through, bringing everything from freezing rain to heavy snow and warnings of a blizzard. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, another embarrassing security breach. This time, the TSA's secret-filled manual for screening air travelers winds up online. Defense Secretary Gates tells President Karzai to get Afghan security forces trained fast, but promises
our government will not again turn our back on this country or the region.
And we'll take you to ground zero for global warming, because what's happening there could be devastating for all of us.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. Much of the country is getting a preview of winter tonight. Blizzard warnings are up in parts of the Midwest as a monster storm that started on the Pacific coast moved into the nation's midsection today. It will be heading into the Northeast tomorrow. The storm is packing strong winds, freezing rain, and heavy snow, as much as 16 inches predicted in some areas in the Midwest. A National Weather Service meteorologist in Iowa said anyone traveling there tomorrow morning is taking a huge risk of being stranded. National correspondent Dean Reynolds is in Chicago tonight. And Dean, this is one dangerous storm.
Katie, the storm that shook the West from Arizona to Washington State is roaring east now, and it's time to batten down the hatches. This dangerous storm left huge trucks strewn along the roadside like litter in New Mexico, knocked out power for thousands in Phoenix, Arizona, and claimed at least 5 lives in weather-related traffic accidents. With winds of up to 40 miles an hour and gusts to 75, the storm resembles a wintry hurricane, including blizzard conditions and below-zero temperatures. Arctic winds from Canada colliding with warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico are strengthening the monster as it bears down on the Great Plains tonight and later the upper Midwest.
And with a strengthening storm, you get more precipitation, you get heavier amounts of snow, and you start getting strong winds behind it.
Planes leaving San Jose, California were being de-iced for what could be a treacherous trip east. Flights from Chicago's O'Hare and Midway airports were delayed as much as 4 hours even before the storm hit, with chain reaction backups elsewhere in the country. 300 flights were canceled at O'Hare alone. Jennifer Dant was hoping to fly to Omaha.
They put me on a 9:15 flight tonight, which I don't think is likely to leave.
Traveling by road in the path of the storm now is flatly reckless.
I would not recommend any travel across Nebraska, Iowa, northern Illinois, and southern Wisconsin over the next 24 hours.
Wave heights on the Great Lakes tonight during this storm may reach 25 feet, conditions that are worse than they were back in November of 1975 when the freighter, the Edmund Fitzgerald, broke apart and sank during a storm on Lake Superior, killing all 29 crewmen aboard. Katie?
Dean Reynolds, we can tell the winds have really picked up in Chicago. Dean, thanks very much for that report. Now turning to an embarrassing security breach, a secret manual that tells airport screeners all across the country how to do their jobs somehow wound up online for all the world to see. What was in it? Here's our Justice correspondent, Bob Orr.
The breach reveals some of the government's most sensitive aviation security secrets. The 93-page manual prepared for federal airport screeners shows samples of law enforcement and official credentials, federal air marshals, CIA officers, and members of Congress, IDs which criminals or terrorists could copy. The document also reveals travelers from a dozen countries, including Cuba, North Korea, Somalia, and Yemen, are always subjected to extra screening. The Transportation Security Administration says the security playbook prepared in May of 2008 is out of date, and the sensitive methods have been updated 6 times. Adding in a statement, TSA is confident that screening procedures currently in place remain strong. Still, TSA never meant for this information to be public. Each page of the report carries this notice: warning, this record contains sensitive security information. No part may be disclosed without a need to know. The TSA says the whole report was improperly posted by the agency on a government job site with redactions. But Wired magazine editor John Abel says savvy bloggers easily restored the blacked out text.
Clearly, this was a rookie mistake. So let's just call this a very early Christmas present to the kinds of people that traffic in this kind of secret information.
Some of the compromised information is just routine, common sense. An on-duty airport-assigned law enforcement officer may be cleared without undergoing screening. But other guidance is less intuitive. For example, searches for explosive residue are not required for wheelchairs, prosthetic devices, and orthopedic shoes.
The TSA is investigating and says it takes the failure seriously. But critics say with aviation a known terrorist target, it's a little late to get serious. Bob Orr, CBS News, Washington.
And now to the place the war on terror began and continues, Afghanistan. With a U.S. troop surge about to begin, Defense Secretary Robert Gates told Afghanistan's president today, face-to-face, those troops won't be there forever. We have two reports tonight from National Security Correspondent David Martin and Terry McCarthy in Kabul. First, here's Terry.
With U.S. troops in Afghanistan due to be increased by 30,000, Defense Secretary Gates today urged President Hamid Karzai to speed up the training of Afghan security forces so they can take over as soon as possible from the U.S.
As President Obama has made very clear, this is not an open-ended commitment on the part of the United States.
But Karzai said it would be 5 years before Afghan forces would be ready to stand on their own, and much longer before the government could pay for them.
Maybe for another 15 to 20 years. Afghanistan will not be able to sustain a force of that nature.
Not fast enough for Gates.
I would hope that we not only could meet the timelines that President Karzai has laid out, but that as more Afghans are trained, that we will be able to beat those timelines.
The U.S. plan is to begin withdrawing by middle of 2011, but many Afghans here think that 18-month timetable is too short and fear that once again they may be abandoned to a civil war.
It is very short time and it will be better to renew and prolong this one.
Gates vowed not to repeat the mistakes of 1989, when the U.S. forgot about Afghanistan once the Soviets had withdrawn.
Our government will not again turn our back on this country or the region.
But whatever the timing for a U.S. troop withdrawal, both the Karzai and the Obama administrations agree the time to defeat the Taliban is running out. Terry McCarthy, CBS News, Kabul.
This is David Martin at the Pentagon. With the first of the 30,000 additional troops set to arrive next week, General Stanley McChrystal, the commander in Afghanistan, called the next 18 months critical. And he gave Congress milestones to judge whether the surge is working. Remember these dates: July 2010.
I expect there to be significant progress that is evident to us inside our force.
December 2010.
I expect that we'll be able to lay real progress out that will be clear to everyone.
July 2011.
I think the progress will be unequivocally clear to the Afghan people. And when it's unequivocally clear to them, that will be a critical, decisive point.
That's the deadline by which McChrystal expects to begin pulling out combat troops. It would be a dramatic turnaround in a war the chairman of the Joint Chiefs says the U.S. is currently losing.
We clearly are not winning right now. And in a counterinsurgency, you're either winning or you're losing. There's no middle ground here. We're not winning, which means we're losing.
On his way to Afghanistan, Defense Secretary Gates said, "We're in this thing to win." So what would a win over the estimated 28,000 Taliban fighters look like?
We intend to prevent them from doing what they want to do.
What the Taliban want is to control Afghanistan. U.S. troops can almost certainly prevent that. But McChrystal indicated it could take a generation before Afghan troops can do it on their own. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
There are also questions tonight about what will happen in Iraq when the more than 100,000 U.S. troops there pull out by the end of 2011. Just today, Baghdad was rocked by 5 deadly bombings. The government says at least 127 people were killed and more than 500 wounded. Elizabeth Palmer has the latest.
In scenes depressingly familiar to Iraqis, rescue crews helped the wounded and carried off the dead. This was a coordinated attack. The 3 main car bombs all detonated within a few minutes. All targeted government buildings, including the finance ministry's new headquarters. Its old offices were destroyed in August in a similar attack. Recent bombings, including a massive one in October, have killed more than 370 people. Many of them were the skilled officials badly needed to run the country as American forces prepare to pull out. But not all today's casualties were political. One bomb went off near the School of Fine Arts, where National Symphony musicians had gathered to rehearse. It's too early to know how many of them were hurt or killed. On the streets, Iraqis are asking, how could this have happened again? There are innocent victims under the debris, says Ahmed Jaber. Why did the Iraqi troops let the bomber by? Across the country, Iraqis seeing the devastation will be wondering, if their security forces can't protect government buildings, how are they going to keep voters safe on Election Day in March? Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News, London.
Earlier today, I spoke with the commander of U.S. forces in Iraq, General Ray Odierno. I asked him whether today's attacks, believed to be the work of al-Qaeda and Saddam loyalists, are an indication that violence in that country is on the rise.
I think it's an anomaly. I think it's more difficult for them to conduct attacks in Iraq. But as we saw today, they're still capable of doing it and killing, as you said, 100 innocent civilians.
Does it make you rethink the strategy of withdrawing U.S. forces from major cities?
No, it doesn't. That's what they'd like us to do, frankly. I think it's important that the Iraqi security forces secure their own people. Combating suicide bombs is a very difficult business, but they are doing very well at it. We'll continue to support them in all of their endeavors.
Having said that, why weren't the Iraqi security forces better able to protect these innocent people?
Yeah. Well, in two cases today, there was in two of the bombs, actually, they were stopped at police checkpoints. Unfortunately, one of the bombs went off near a school, a college, which killed many young people and children as well. And frankly, what it's doing is it's turning the Iraqi people more and more against their movement. So I think it's a strategy for them that is not going to work. And it just is so painful for me and everybody to see these innocent people killed.
Coming up next on the CBS Evening News, the president's plan for creating more jobs. Will it be money well spent? What will it take to put Americans back to work? President Obama said today it will take still more government spending. Chip Reid is at the White House tonight. And Chip, is the president worried that people will criticize him for throwing more money at the problem?
You know, Katie, he's really not. In fact, he came right out today and said that what this nation needs to do is spend its way out of this recession.
We are not yet creating jobs at a pace to help all those families who've been swept up in the flood.
The president said the federal government needs to do more to create jobs and laid out a list of ideas. Some are anything but new, like an additional $50 billion for transportation projects, essentially a second stimulus, even though only about a third of the first stimulus has been spent, or as Republicans say, wasted.
Billions and billions and billions, as much as 50 already, have been spent on projects that don't create jobs.
In a new report on the first stimulus, McCain says some projects are just plain silly. For example, $221,000 for a study on why young men don't like condoms, $5 million to provide geothermal heat for a Tennessee mall that's all but empty, and $950,000 for studying ant behavior at 2 Arizona universities. The president today also proposed tax breaks for small businesses, including a 1-year elimination of capital gains taxes on new investments and tax incentives for small businesses to hire workers. One idea from the president that is relatively new, rebates for homeowners who invest in energy-efficient retrofits.
The more we can keep these homes warm, the more the country's going to save money.
Michael Bushery, whose family business in Virginia makes weatherproof windows, says it could help him rehire some laid-off workers. but only if the program is done right.
I think if the government was to really clearly define what the rules are and also let people know how much energy they really are losing in their homes.
On Capitol Hill, Democrats say a second stimulus could cost as much as $150 billion. Republicans say whatever the cost, it's going to plunge the nation deeper into debt. Katie?
Chip Reid at the White House tonight. Thank you, Chip. Up next, more problems for Tiger Woods. For the second time in less than 2 weeks, an ambulance rushed to the Florida home of Tiger Woods. Early this morning, paramedics took his mother-in-law to the hospital after she complained of stomach pains. Barbara Holmberg has been at her daughter's side since reports of alleged affairs by Woods came to light. After Holmberg collapsed on a bathroom floor, a call was placed to 911.
Oh my God, hurry up. Fire rescue. Okay, hurry up. My mom just collapsed. Please. Okay, calm down, okay? What's she breathing? She collapsed in the bathroom.
It's unclear if it was Woods' wife, Elin, or her twin sister making that call. Holmberg was treated at the hospital and released nearly 12 hours later. We have another update now on one of the hottest toys this holiday season, the toy hamsters called Zuzus. We told you last night the government was investigating a claim by a consumer group that it found hazardous levels of a chemical on one of those toys. Tonight, federal officials say they are in fact safe, and the consumer group now admits its testing methods were flawed. And coming up next, it may be the one place in the world that actually welcomes climate change. At the World Climate Conference in Copenhagen today, scientists said this decade is on track to become the warmest since records were first kept back in 1850. Last night, Mark Phillips reported from the Maldives, where rising seas could mean disaster. But there's a very different view in Greenland, where melting glaciers could bring opportunity. Mark is back with tonight's Eye on the Environment.
There's no mystery about the effect global warming is having on the great glaciers of Greenland. More ice breaking off and floating out to sea than has ever been observed before. They call this place Iceberg, Ilulissat in the Greenlandic language, and it's easy to see why. Greenland's most active glacier now sheds enough ice each year to cover Manhattan almost a mile deep. Space imagery of the glacier shows how it's been shrinking back over the years, supporting the scientific consensus that the Greenland ice cap is thinning. The meltwater causing sea levels around the world to rise. Levels that are feared may rise another 2 feet or more this century by the most widely accepted estimates. These mountain-sized bergs have been called the best evidence of global warming on the planet.
Once, this was the wall of the glacier, but it's been receding at a quicker and quicker rate so that now you'd have to travel about 50 miles straight up that fjord to get to the glacial wall itself.
For Johannes Mathiasen and the 4,500 people who live in Ilulissat, warmer weather means having to adapt. If the sea ice doesn't freeze up solid, allowing them to go out to hunt seals and to fish, they can make money taking intrepid tourists on dog sled trips into the spectacular, if stark, hinterland.
Extreme Greenland!
The winters around here just aren't what they used to be.
Now, maximum winter 25.
Minus 25.
Yeah.
That's minus 25 Celsius, about 13 below zero Fahrenheit. But in the old days...
Minus 40.
Minus 40 before.
Yeah. 40, 45.
Yet Greenlanders, all 57,000 of them, share a quiet little secret. For them, there may be a silver lining in the climate change cloud.
The scientists say that the production of icebergs is speeding up, that the glacier is running about twice as quickly as it did just 5 years ago. There's another thing that's speeding up here too, the economy.
Where Greenland's economy is now based on fishing and on a massive subsidy from the colonial authority Denmark, There's now a construction boom going on in the capital of Nuuk, a town of about 17,000 people.
Gold, copper, South Greenland.
Mining companies are lining up to explore the rich deposits of gold, copper, and iron ore that are becoming more accessible as the ice recedes from the coastal regions. And there are good signs as well of significant oil reserves offshore. Inside their mittens, Greenlanders may have their fingers crossed that their future looks bright. The trick will be to preserve their traditions while adapting to the changes. There is a worry here that too much wealth too soon may not be a good thing.
I am afraid of getting rich right away because it will affect our way of thinking. I do trust our people that we're going to figure it out. I mean, we're survivors.
Back on his sled, Johannes Mathiasen may be concerned that the old ways will have to change here, and he's not yet thinking of himself as a sled dog millionaire. But whatever devastation climate change may cause elsewhere in the world, you get the sense Johannes thinks that here, on the edge of civilization, there may be good times ahead. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Ilulissat, Greenland.
Great piece. And that's the CBS Evening News. Thank you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.